Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. This show is brought to you by Simplifying, which has been helping build trust in travel for over a decade. Through in-depth conversation with aviation leaders, sustainability in the air breaks through the current clutter and provides a clear roadmap for the future. It's about time we embarked on creating a net zero future for the industry, together. This season of the podcast is brought to you by Carbon Click, leaders in managing carbon offsetting programs for top global airlines. Without further ado, here is your host, Shashank Nigam, CEO of Simplifying.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air podcast with me, Shashank Nigam. Hydrogen is being touted as a near to midterm solution for green aviation, for getting to net zero, for helping airlines. And universal hydrogen is one of the big players leading this charge from the front. John Paul, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show. I'm very curious to hear how you got started with universal hydrogen.
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting story, actually. It all started at a dinner in New York City. Four of us were discussing, what do we want to do in the future, and all four of us had a strong interest in sustainability and aviation, and we were sort of tossing ideas around. And one of our co-founders, John Gordon, said, "Hey, we really got to do something for our kids, and hydrogen, is the way." We knew amongst ourselves that batteries don't scale very well. And we knew that sustainable aviation fuels were quite expensive and would never get to the point where they're lower than, jet fuel. And so we thought about hydrogen, and then we started thinking, putting on our thinking caps, as they would say, about what were the challenges. And we quickly realized that infrastructure was going to be one of the biggest challenges. And we also realized that, the use of hydrogen in other sectors, in automobiles and, as temporary storage for excess electricity capacity, all of these other things that would drive down the price of hydrogen. And so we said, well, if the price of hydrogen is going down, the real big stumbling block is going to be the infrastructure. And that's the reason why we tackled that problem per se.
That's fantastic. Now, one of the things I learned while researching for this interview was there's a difference between green hydrogen, gray hydrogen, and blue hydrogen. I had no idea hydrogen has colors.
Yes, hydrogen has many colors. There's even pink hydrogen.
Really?
Yes, yeah. So, so the difference, green hydrogen is hydrogen that's produced from renewable sources. So, for example, typically it's electrolysis, and the electricity is generated through some renewable source, hydroelectric, wind farms, whatever like that. Blue hydrogen is produced from natural gas. And the idea there is that you actually sequester or contain the carbon dioxide that you produce during the process. But the other thing is that you still produce methane. And then gray hydrogen, there is no sequestration of CO2. So it's basically, it produces CO2 in the process. It also produces methane. Methane is kind of one of the things that always happens with natural gas through leakages, et cetera. So, blue is certainly better than gray, but they're not anywhere close to being as good as green. And so that's why our focus is on green. You could make the argument that pink is basically produced with nuclear energy. And so you could make an argument that pink is close to acceptable because you're going to store the waste for such a long time, et cetera, assuming you store the waste safely. But we have been focused on green. And what we have seen is that there's a lot of capacity being brought on board and brought on stream for green hydrogen production. So we don't see that as being an issue.
Very interesting. Now, what's the cost difference? What's the green premium difference between producing green hydrogen versus blue versus gray versus pink? Which is the most expensive versus the least expensive right now?
Well, right now, green is more expensive. But the thing about green is that if you think about a hydroelectric plant, it costs a lot to build. But the marginal cost to produce a kilowatt of electricity is very low. And so the fact that we're having such high demand for hydrogen is driving the prices of green hydrogen down. And we expect it to be on par, with $1 per kilogram range by the decade, on par with the targets that the Biden administration have had. And so we're thinking that it will be on, when all is done, when you consider all the taxes and everything like that, that by 2025 it'll start to come on par from a seat mile on a per seat mile basis with Jet A fuel, because and that's particularly in the case of regional turboprops where you use fuel cell and motors, because motors and fuel cells have lower maintenance costs than internal combustion engines.
Right. No, that makes good sense, because as there's more demand, the costs indeed come down. There's, of course, we'll dive deeper into cost, but there's also this perception. When I think hydrogen, I think Hindenburg and airships. Has hydrogen come a long way since the Hindenburg days, and is it really much safer now?
Well, the Toyota has been producing the Mirai for a number of years now. And the data out there confirms, or at least validates, that it's a very safe car. They've done a lot of tests. The thing about hydrogen, we know certain properties of hydrogen that make it very safe. For example, when you have a car has an accident, the fuel tends to pool and flow out. Same is true in an aircraft. And so it wets the material, and then once it's lit, then it burns the material. Hydrogen, it's a gas, and it's a very light gas, the lightest gas. So as soon as you have an accident, as long as you vent it quickly, as long as it wants to vent quickly, and then even if it burns and it basically vaporizes very, very quickly. So you can dilute it with air very, very readily, because to get it to range, or you can actually make sure that whatever it is in can resist the flame for the short period of time it burns. So there's lots of things that you can do, and the Hindenburg is an unfortunate combination of things, right? Basically it was grounding the airship in the middle of a lightning storm, right? Which is I'm not sure, unless you had, how much. There's a lot of things that went wrong there that should not have, and we know way better now about how to deal with this.
Right. And definitely, technology has changed. We want to make sure it's safer, and like you said, it's been tested in automobiles. Now, hydrogen in an existing airplane, does that require new engines? Can we just pump it in the existing engine? How does it actually work?
Well, it depends on the aircraft engine, because not all aircraft engines are the same. So we think, we believe that at the regional turboprop level, what you would do at the smaller regional turboprops, in the 30 to 50 seat range, you would have a fuel cell, and then you'll have a fuel cell generating electricity and driving a motor. So a fuel cell has a chemical reaction between hydrogen and oxygen to produce water and electricity, and that would just go straight into the motor and basically turn it. And the fuel cells are quite efficient. And so in combination with the motor, you get an overall propulsive efficiency that's better than the existing engines. Now, the issue with fuel cells is that they're somewhat heavy. They're coming down in what we call specific power, in terms of the amount of power you produce per unit mass. However, there's still a bit to go there. So as you get to the bigger size turboprops, we envision that it'll be direct combustion. And it turns out that and then when you get to single aisle aircraft, right, which is one of the areas where we also think that hydrogen will play a role, the real change you have to make there is in the combustor, because the hydrogen has a different flame speed and different sort of burn properties than Jet A when you're burning it and you're actually diffusing it and adding it to the air. And so the combustor you have to make changes there. But overall, in terms of the compressors and the turbines, if you can do it right in the combustor, then you have minimal changes on the others. You have to do some external piping and to flow the hydrogen in and stuff, but the real change isn't going to be in the combustor. The compressor and turbines will be very little change.
So just to make this plain vanilla for someone who does not have the level of knowledge you have in terms of engine, what is the difference between a combustor, compressor and a turbine.
Okay. So the way like say your engine on say a A320 or a 737 or any sort of large commercial jet engine works is that you have a compressor, which is a row of blades that basically pushes the air into smaller and smaller volume. And so what that does, it basically increases the density of the air. It also increases the pressure of the air, increases the temperature of the air. Once that's done, you add fuel, whatever the fuel might be, and then you light it. And that basically then releases energy, which then causes that mixture of fuel and air to want to run out the back, rush out the back. And the turbines are literally like blades, which basically get spun around as the air comes rushing out. And then there's a shaft that takes that power that's being extracted by the turbines and brings it upstream to the compressors then to compress the air coming in. So that's how you get the jet engine to work, is that you literally reach an equilibrium where the power that's being extracted by the turbines is the same amount of power that's being used to compress the air coming in, and you add the right amount of fuel to keep that in an equilibrium. So that's how a jet engine works. And in a regional turboprop that has an internal combustion engine, it's a similar thing. The compressor is slightly different shape. It's usually a centrifugal compressor, which is one where you put the air down the middle and it forces the air out to the side. And they typically are less efficient than the axial compressors that we have in a jet engine. But all in all, it's the same process. You compress the air, bring it up in pressure, temperature, increase the density, add fuel, burn it, and capture the energy as it rushes out the back because it's so energetic.
I love it. Thank you for Jet Engines 101 lesson here, here for the listeners who may not be as familiar. Now, one of the things with hydrogen, okay, it seems like it can be put in just by some minor changes, not major changes to the aircraft engines for the fuel. But from what I understand, it's really about transportation of hydrogen and the airport infrastructure to store hydrogen that requires substantial modifications. Am I right?
Yeah, so I would say the changes are minor is a little bit excessive. I mean, you have some change in the compressor, and you have to worry about flame stability and stuff, but it's all doable. So they're doable changes. So that's straightforward. The infrastructure is a challenge. I've always remind myself there is a reason why all the gas stations around the country and around the world have a moniker that corresponds to an oil company, right? Because in order for Exxon and Shell to sell their products to cars, they had to build out their entire infrastructure themselves. And it took years, and it took a lot of money, right? And so in order for you to get hydrogen from place to place, you have a choice, right? Either you're going to build lots of pipelines, or you're going to get special tanker trucks that will transport it, or you're going to come up with a solution that can use the existing infrastructure, which is basically what our approach is. And so our approach is to have what we call modules that are filled with hydrogen, either liquid or gas. We'll fill them at some location where we have green electricity, which typically is not close to where people live. And then we will then put them on a truck or a rail or a ship or whatever. Ideally, a truck that's renewable, being run on renewable resources as well, and deliver them to an airport near you, right? And so the idea then is that we don't have to invest in special trucks, right? And the modules get filled once and extracted once, basically, so you don't have the losses during every transfer. So every time you take hydrogen from one vessel to another vessel, you get some losses. And so we avoid that because you fill it once, we transport our modules directly to the airport, and we put it directly in the airplane and attach it and hook it up to the airplane. And so it's extracted when it's going to be used in the airplane. So there's no transfer losses along the way.
Very interesting. What does this module look like? Does this look like one of those pellets of cargo you put with my bags on?
Yeah, well, it turns out we've designed it so that the bottom of it is literally like a cargo pallet, so that we can hook it on using the same cargo, ball mats or loaders like we do. Again, low infrastructure costs, right? We didn't want to have to change anything at the airport for this. And so it's the ones that we have designed for the regional turboprop look like two cylinders, one on top of each other in a frame. And the design that we did was actually was based on a principle of what we call axiomatic design, where we every system has multiple functions to satisfy, right? And so a system like this, you need to have basically you need to be able to contain the hydrogen, and the particles don't seep out, right? That's called permeation. The second thing, it has to be able to withstand the pressure loads, right? The third thing, it has to be able to withstand abrasion, because things move around, they brush against other things. And then the last thing, it has to withstand the crash loads. And so we designed a system where we had a liner that keeps the hydrogen in. A next layer, in the gaseous case, it is a dry carbon fiber weave. In the liquid case is a metal that will actually contain the pressure. Another layer, which basically contains there's an abrasion. And in the gaseous case, it's like a Kevlar weave or some kind of aramide or something like that. And then the last but not least is the frame, because we all know from Engineering 101, a truss is a great way to carry a point load. So we actually carry the crash loads in the frame, as opposed to having to design a cylinder that can withstand all the crash loads. And so by segmenting out that functionality, we're able to reduce the weight of the system and increase the mass fraction.
Wow. Okay, yet another technical engineering lesson there. I'm gonna annotate this video with lots of overlays and diagrams to make sure this comes through. Now, one of the things you mentioned was production of green hydrogen and then transporting it. How and where can we produce this green hydrogen so that it's close to airports, and you're not transporting it from New York to California just to get it on a plane?
Right. Well, so anywhere you have water, you can do electrolysis, and you have some renewable energy, you can do electrolysis. So a wind farm, a hydroelectric dam. And those are if you even around the US, you spread around, you see a lot of hydroelectric dams. In Northwest, you have the Grand Coulee, you have a lot of you have Niagara. In New York, you have lots of dams along the Colorado River. There all of these dams are on the place. And then wind farms are going up, and solar farms are going up all across the country. Interestingly, hydrogen was proposed many years ago as a way to store off-peak energy at a lot of these renewable electricity supply locations, because typically, you have a cycle for demand for the day. Turning on and turning off a hydroelectric dam is really, really hard. It takes, because of the inertia of all those blades. So you don't want it to be just spinning them up and spinning them down. You want them to be running at a steady power level. And so when the demand goes down, you basically dump all the excess electricity in heat. And so the idea was to use that excess electricity and create hydrogen, and then use the hydrogen later to produce electricity. So that was one idea before we even thought about it, using it within our context, that people have been pushing as a way to store excess electricity during off-peak periods.
That's very interesting. So it seems, unlike SAF, production of hydrogen is not an issue. Is the transport and putting into the plane that requires infrastructure modification.
Yes, because the point is, we know how to do electrolysis. We've been doing it for a long, long time. I think everybody who's done high school sciences probably remember the experiment where you did a little electrolysis. So, it's not magical. You put electricity through water and it turns into oxygen and hydrogen.
Yep, I remember splitting those modules.
That's right, exactly.
Molecules.
That's right. So, it's pretty straightforward. And it's just about getting, the renewable electricity to make it happen.
Okay, so if the production is not the big barrier, what is the biggest challenge?
And no, it's infrastructure. It's and that's the reason why we tackled it, because you can get cheap hydrogen, very cheap, in the middle of the night next to a hydroelectric dam, right? Very cheap. It's getting it from there to the airport where you need it, right? And so that's the reason why we started this company, and that's why we're so laser focused on coming up with a storage solution that makes sense. And that storage solution is synergistic with a transportation solution that makes sense. And, having those two is what is good enough. But then, we're also building a powertrain to make sure that we control our own destiny, because we want to make sure that we have an airplane that can actually use it, so that we have the entire life cycle and the entire system in place by 2025.
Okay, so let's talk about planes and whether hydrogen can be used in existing planes or do we need new planes. Now, Airbus has, of course, come up with released concepts for new hydrogen-powered planes. Do you foresee that we will need new aircraft to be developed to use hydrogen exclusively, or do you foresee current existing jets being able to use hydrogen in significant manners as well?
So let me start by saying you can retrofit existing aircraft to use hydrogen, which is the approach that we're taking. We're retrofitting, Dash 8s and ATRs, right, to use hydrogen. Now, in any system, if you're retrofitting, you're not going to be optimized perfectly for the new system, right? And so, yes, clearly, a brand new airplane where you optimize for all the benefits that hydrogen provides. So there are other benefits too, right? All of those things would be better, but that is not a showstopper, because the existing airplanes we have shown convincingly, because we have a fair number of letters of intent from airlines, that we can modify the existing aircraft. You do take a small penalty in terms of the number of seats, because hydrogen being less dense, you're going to have to take out some part of the fuselage to store them. However, with the lower maintenance cost and the added benefits, you end up with a per seat mile cost that is at least equal to, but in many cases better to than you have with a Jet A. And that's including, saying we have less passengers, so we have the crew cost per passenger goes up. All of that is included, but everything rolled together, it's equal to or better.
Okay, let's talk about costs then.
Okay.
We see current Jet A fuel versus SAF versus hydrogen. Where does it all stack up on a per passenger basis?
Well, I would say, SAF is going to be more expensive. And, there's potential in SAF for competing resources, because a lot of this is on bio, and where we're going to grow all the stuff that we need to produce all the SAFs that we actually are going to need. I'll leave that to debate to somebody else to figure out where on earth we're going to put it, no pun intended. I see, like I said, we're seeing, anywhere from, like I said, equal to like maybe 90% of the per seat mile, so a 10% reduction per seat mile cost, depending, of course, on the aircraft and where you are, by the way, because the thing about hydrogen, it costs more in certain jurisdictions than others just because of the cost of electricity, right? And so that's really the main driver there. So we see, at the regional turboprop level, hydrogen being the lowest, then jet, and then SAFs, which is all the more reason why I think, the solution to our sustainability problem is going to be a mixture of all of hydrogen and SAFs. So I see, for example, at the regional turboprop and at the single aisle, that hydrogen, in my mind, is the winner. And then once you get to the longer haul aircraft, where the volumes will become prohibitive and the costs you're less sensitive to the cost of the fuel, and because you have more passengers and you're going a longer distance, then the SAF will become the dominant player there. So there's a region, batteries in my mind for short VTOLs that are in very small, not going very far, a hybrid between batteries and hydrogen for VTOLs around major big cities, pure hydrogen in a fuel cell and motor, then direct burn hydrogen, and then SAFs. So that's how I see the landscape playing out. And there's and where that dividing line depends on the size of the aircraft, the range that you want, etc.
Right. So this is almost like the longer range the aircraft, the more of a SAF or traditional fuel you will need. The shorter range the aircraft, the more innovative you can get in terms of technology, like eVTOLs, like you said.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, we did some analysis of eVTOLs, and it turns out that a hybrid solution where you have a high C battery and you use a hydrogen fuel cell for the cruise portion because of the difference in L over D from hover, take off and hover to cruise. You can basically, reduce the weight of the vehicle overall by almost 50%.
Wow. By using a combination of hydrogen and electricity.
Hydrogen and battery, fuel cell, hydrogen, fuel cell, and battery.
Got it.
So, and that's for the eVTOL space. And then, as like I said, as you get to bigger and bigger in the regional and you get to the single aisle, you want direct combustion. So, and that's because, certain things scale in a certain way, right? And that's just how life is. Batteries don't scale very well because as soon as you extract the energy, it's dead weight.
And batteries are way heavier than hydrogen.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's dead weight as well. You have to carry it along. In addition to that, you have to carry the dead weight along.
Yeah. No, that is absolutely true. Universal Hydrogen has, of course, been signing partnerships with a number of manufacturers. Other than Zeravia and Airbus, which are the other major partnerships you've struck to bring this to life?
Well, we have one with H3 Dynamics. I don't know if you heard about that one as well. We have agreements with, on the production side, we have agreements with FFI, which is a global agreement to get hydrogen at a reasonable price. And we have also similar agreements with companies in New Zealand and Plug Power, as an investor. And so we've been working very hard on to shore up our share of the production capacity. And then, we have other things forthcoming you'll hear about in the not too distant future. And we have an agreement with Deutsche Aircraft. You probably heard about that one. They're building a new aircraft, and we are, we're doing the tanks for them, and then another company is doing the powertrain. So even though we have a powertrain, our business is really storage and logistics, and so that's a classic example where we're actually providing our storage solution, and another company is providing the powertrain, and Deutsche is doing the aircraft, and we're working quite closely together.
Right. You recently announced a new Mexico site. How is that going to help with operations?
Well, that's going to be around production of both our storage solutions and also our powertrains. So that's going to be our primary manufacturing site for our gaseous solution and our powertrains. And so that's really what it's going to be. For to date, we've just been doing the development work. That's going to be our manufacturing hub. And New Mexico is a great place. It's a hub of a bunch of rail lines. And the local authorities and the state authorities have been quite good in terms and very supportive, and has with all the national labs nearby, you have a lot of very well trained technical base to work. So it was a great solution for us.
Okay, no, that given their train lines, is easier to transport as well, I'm guessing.
Yes, exactly. And there's an airport right next to our facility that we're going to have. So, we can send it out anywhere you want. We can send you, we send you by, there's a song like that, I think. But anyway, let's not do that.
We'll get to the song at the end of the podcast. How's that?
No singing.
Now, it was, I believe, 1957 when the world saw the first hydrogen-operated flight. When is it that you expect passengers to be flying on a hydrogen-powered aircraft again?
2025.
And who's going to be that with?
We have a number of airlines that we have signed up. That's to be determined. I leave it to my colleague Rod Williams, who's the chief commercial officer, working to figure out what makes sense. But we have we're working it. I mean, we have, like I said, we have lots of people are interested in being first, and we will depending on which aircraft we modify first, whether it's the Dash 8 or the ATR, all that stuff. That will all have to play into who ends up being the first to fly.
Right. Which are some of the commercial airlines that you have partnered with that we can expect hydrogen on?
Well, we have a number. We have the new airline, also Matilda Connect Air, which is just starting up. We have Iceland Air. We have Air Nostrum in Spain. We have a slew of others. We have Raven Alaska, which is a small airline in Alaska. So we're amongst the spectrum, and we're in conversations with other airlines. Like I said, I'm not here to tell tales out of school, as
No,
they would
sure.
say.
That sounds good. So what I'm learning is that universal hydrogen has come a long way, specifically focusing on the infrastructure of transporting hydrogen safely and fitting it
And storing
and
it.
storing it.
And
And
storing it.
storing it exactly.
Yes.
So transporting and storing hydrogen in a safe manner. What does success look like for you and your four-member co-founding team?
Well, I think it's more than just success for the four of us. It's success for everyone. I will say, I've been involved in a number of startups in the past, and I was in this particular one. Everybody is bought on to the mission. So this is when I say when you ask about success, this is success for everyone in the company, and for us, success is seeing hydrogen powered airplanes flying as part of the normal flow of aviation, and knowing that the majority of those airplanes are using our modular solution. I think that is what success is for us. I mean, and going back to a point which I should have made earlier is, the thing about every solution, it has to be scalable. And because if you have to wait until everything gets built before you can start, you're always something's going to happen, or somebody's going to find a way to kill it. And so one of the things about the elegance of the solution that we propose is that you can start with one production facility to supply the entire regional network of a regional airline. And as demand grows, you can increase the number of production sites, reduce the linkage of your transportation length, but the solution still remains the same. It's the same module being put in the same way in the same aircraft, or in every aircraft, and connected the same way and utilized the same way. So that for us is why I sleep well at night, because I know that the solution makes sense from a technical perspective, but it also makes sense from a scalability perspective, which is one of the biggest challenges in introduction of technologies.
No, scale is definitely critical, and I'm glad that you focused on it, because that's something the industry is struggling with. Now that lots of airline executives and CEOs have started paying important attention to uh, net zero goals and sustainability, especially post pandemic, what would your advice be to an airline CEO just getting started on the sustainability journey and trying to grapple with SAF and electric and hydrogen and all of these scenarios? What would your advice be on just getting started on net zero path?
First thing, my advice to anyone whenever there is the future involved is always keep an open mind. So that's the first thing. And get to understand the fundamentals. I mean, I'm not asking anybody to become an expert in electrochemistry or combustion or aircraft performance, but get at least to understand the fundamental trades, and where what makes sense and where what doesn't make sense, from not only a technical perspective, but as an economic perspective, an operational perspective. And once you do that, then you'll see that there is no one solution that is the killer app across all segments of the aviation. But you will also realize that hydrogen has a very important role to play. And there's no the other thing about sustainable aviation fuel is that you're still emitting carbon dioxide at altitude. And so even though you say I'm going to take it out at the ground and for net zero, it's okay. In reality, you're still producing soot and all the other particles and stuff at altitude, which you don't have in hydrogen. In that case, you're basically creating water, especially in the fuel cell case, there's no water. In the gaseous case, there's some NOx, but there are things you can do to reduce the NOx as well. So in the direct combustion, there's NOx, but we can do stuff to reduce that. But the bottom line is keep an open mind, because SAF is not the silver bullet.
Yeah, I think that you nailed it. There's no single super app for getting to net zero, and there are multiple solutions which may work for different scenarios, and airline executives have to keep their minds open.
Right. And the thing about the hydrogen is that you get the true zero, not only net zero, true zero, because we're not producing CO2 anywhere with the green hydrogen. So,
okay, perfect. Jean-Paul, thank you so much for an enlightening technical deep dive into everything from jet engines to transportation and storing of hydrogen. I'm pretty excited about Universal Hydrogen's journey as well as your mission, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're most welcome.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. We hope you liked it and will share it with your network. Please also leave us a review. Awareness is the key to a green future. Your support will help our insights on sustainable aviation reach a wider audience. In addition, for every single listen of this podcast, we will plant a tree. And for every single review, we will plant 50 trees. You can also write to us at podcast@simpliflying.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website, simpliflying.com, and join the movement.